Hey, it's Tom from Texas, and it's time for another episode in the series of
What's on that floppy?
We're still going through case number 2, and this is the original series that made me start this channel that everybody loves, where we check out games that you might not have ever seen before on the Commodore 64. And then I'm loading up for the first time. I downloaded all these games off of BBS's back when I was a kid. This was probably around 1986. I was probably about 14 years old and around 7th or 8th grade doing all this. And I would just let the modem run all night downloading these games. And then the next day when I got home from school, loading them up and try to figure out how to play them. So something cool that I'm doing is I want to put the D64 file out there on my website, floppydeepdive.com. So you can download and play all these games too. So go ahead, pull up a chair, grab a joystick, and let's get started. First, let's dive into the most popular game on this floppy, Ghost N Goblins, and let's take a moment to appreciate its arcade roots. Released in 1985 by Capcom, this notoriously difficult game was known as Makamura in Japan, translating to Demon World Village, a fitting name given its haunted atmosphere. And director Takuro would watch players play and make the game more challenging to ensure no player would breeze through his haunted landscapes. And as a player, you're the brave knight Arthur, and who could forget Arthur's iconic armor? A single hit and it's gone. A design choice that has both frustrated and fascinated players for decades. And it's a classic that would transcend the arcade era, making its mark on home consoles and etching its place in gaming history. And speaking of home consoles and computers, let's dive into the Commodore 64 version of this challenging but fantastic port from the arcade. The Commodore 64 version captures the essence of the arcade classic, immersing players in this world of peril and adventure. And despite the hardware limitations, the developers created this haunting atmosphere and intricate gameplay that made it a masterpiece. I also own the original floppy of Ghost N Goblins, and I can confirm that the crack is precisely like it, nothing left out of it. I struggled with jumping over the tombstones, and sometimes you'd get some spriting with too much on the screen, but playing Ghost N Goblins is when I wish I had a controller for the Commodore 64 that had 2 buttons. I find it extremely frustrating, but I never want to stop trying. I just love the music. Playing Ghost N Goblins is like stepping back in time. It's a badge of honor for retro gamers, a mixed thrill of nostalgia showcasing that fear and charm live side by side in this pixelated classic. So let's move on to the next game on this floppy. So next up, we're going to be looking at the game Jailbreak. And first, we're going to look at the arcade version of it. And I've always known this game as Jailbreaker because back in the 80s when you would download games off of BBS's, people just renamed them to whatever they want for whatever reason. And of course, that's all I had. I had nothing to compare it to. I never played Jailbreak, the arcade game, at an arcade. In fact, this is the first time I played the arcade version of it. And I liked the breakout scene at the very beginning. I accidentally kept shooting the hostages, and I don't like how you just touch them and then they kind of just disappear. I think it would be cool if you touched them and then they ran off the screen or something like that, or at least said thank you. And now I move over to the Commodore 64 version, and dang it, there's no escape scene. I do see random hostages running, but very few in the Commodore version. And the controls could be better on the Commodore 64. I can't run and fire from all angles like in the arcade. Also, sometimes when you're going by the prisoner, you think they could only shoot from the gun hand, but the bullet comes out of the hand not holding the gun on the Commodore 64 version, so that was just sloppy by Konami. And I know many people rate this game very low, and I'm not saying it's an excellent game by any means, but it is okay. And for a quick one-time play on the Commodore 64, I say boot it up and give it a play, because I have played many games on the Commodore 64 that were much worse and didn't even work. At least this game works. So that's Jailbreaker. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Next, we're going to step into the game Uchi Mata, which is developed by Martech Games in 1986. And this just isn't a game. This is a simulation of Judo. And at first, Uchi Mata seems confusing and unplayable. And when you got it in the 80s like I did as a kid, if you didn't have the manual, you were out of luck. It looked really cool. It looked like it had great graphics and something you could do, but until you thoroughly read the instructions and begin to use a couple of the simple moves that you could get into the swing of things before you could really appreciate this game. And it wasn't until I did this deep dive that I learned how to actually play this game. I got into the practice mode and actually learned how first you got to grab the opponent with your white box popping up at the top of the screen before you can actually do the move with the joystick to throw them in the direction that you want them to go. And until I started figuring that out, I was just like, hey, this game's actually really good. But it was hard without the manual. It was hard if you just downloaded it as a crack back in the day. And probably a lot of you never even got past that process, because if you were like me as a kid, when you got a game that was just simply too hard, there was just way too many other games to play to take the time to figure it out. But if you did on this one, you definitely got your money's worth on it. And I was checking out some of the reviews from the past, and I always like to look at the C64 and see what they did. And they gave it an overall of 89%. Presentation, they gave 95%, graphics 80, sound 75, hookability 82, lastability 91, and overall value 86. So they really liked this game, and I would be interested if any of y'all actually played it. I know I played a lot of the karate games that was just the beat-em-up type games. But I really liked those, and I was really hoping this one would be like that. But until you get the controls down, it was just too frustrating to figure out to play. But I do give it a thumbs up. Definitely, I played it more than I ever have in the 80s. And it was definitely one I want to go back to and learn and get a little bit better at. So let's go ahead and move on to the next game.
Could be playing Trilistron. So it says start. I'm hoping that big long word there means spacebar. And just like we had to in the 80s, just guessed on a lot of stuff. Interesting. Graphics aren't bad, whoever made this. I'm going to try to pick a different button, see if that turns it to joystick. So we're going to say expert, and I'm going to hoping number 2. I'm hoping that's keyboard, and I'm hoping that means joystick. Let's see if it works. Hey, that was right.
Trilistron is a German game released for the Commodore 64 in 1985 by Quillsoft.
In doing these deep dives, it's just like the 80s. As a kid, when you were trying, you didn't have no manual. You're just trying to figure stuff out. And when it's in another language, you just guess. And luckily, I guessed right with the joystick. I like this. I actually give it a thumbs up. I like these kind of games. Blast them and shoot them up. Graphics not bad. Sounds pretty good. I'm going to be guessing that a lot of people probably never even seen or heard of this game, which is another reason why we do these deep dives. There's just so much software for the Commodore 64. A lot that people never even seen or heard of. So now this ship crashes into this other ship. I'm not hitting very many of these. So someone who speaks this language, I'm assuming it's German, let me know what that's saying at the end. I see die, and that's what I did. So I assume I died. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Next up is Trip to Atlantis by Key Punch Software. Adventure by Key Punch Software. Welcome to the wonderful world of adventure. Hit return to continue. In this adventure, you're exploring the lost city of Atlantis in search of the treasures. I will be your eyes and hands during the adventure. Direct me with ordinary English sentences of 1 or 2 words. Some examples: get tank, inventory, kill Manta. Use any noun verb combination you can think of, because in this game, anything goes. If this adventure is taking a long time to solve, don't fret. It was designed to do so. Press spacebar to begin. And this is actually, I was doing this floppy deep dive back in, gosh, I guess in August now. And this is when I came up with the idea of, hey, I should try ChatGPT and see if it can play text-based games, and sure enough it could, and that's when I went to Hitchhiker's Guide. So it was this game right here that actually gave me the thought of trying to do something different. Now, it's very difficult to make text-based games exciting to watch in a video, so I won't bore you since I didn't do ChatGPT on this one. So we won't stay on this game long, but I just wanted to show it to you. Trip to Atlantis. Like it said on my floppy, I had it down as Trip to Atlanta. It was just crazy. But I never really played this game. I had too many other games to play at this time, and there's much better text-based games to play besides this one. But since it was on the floppy, I wanted to show it to you guys. So let's go ahead and go to the next one. That's all, folks. That's all the games that's on this floppy. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, down in the comments, you tell me which games did you play, which system did you play them on, or did you never hear about any of these games? If you want to check them out, go out to my website, floppydeepdive.com, and download the D64 file, and you can play all these games too. So until next time, stay creative, stay curious, and keep retro gaming.